I was the only man certified to touch the 110 kilovolt line powering Bennett Myers' $50 million factory. But when I asked for a mandatory safety inspection, Bennett fired me on the spot, calling me a cheap Sparky and replacing me with his unlicensed nephew. I didn't argue. I just packed my tools, walked away, and watched the clock ticking down to the moment the lights went out for good. There is a specific sound that 110,000 volts makes when it is contained within a transformer the size of a shipping container. It isn't a buzz, it is a hum, a low-frequency vibration that you feel in your teeth before you hear it with your ears. To the uninitiated, it sounds like power. To me, it sounds like a sleeping dragon waiting for an excuse to wake up. I checked my watch. It was 6 o'clock a.m. The sun hadn't even crested the horizon yet. But I was already 60 feet up in the bucket lift, hovering over the main substation for the Tanaka manufacturing plant. The air was crisp, smelling faintly of ozone and wet gravel. "Mason, how's the temperature looking on Phase B?" Big Dave's voice crackled through my radio headset. I looked at the thermal imaging camera mounted on my rig. The screen showed a gradient of blues and greens, with a hot spot of angry red pulsing right at the connection point. "She's running hot, Dave," I replied, keeping my voice steady. 70 degrees above ambient. We're pushing the thermal limits on these bushings. If we don't schedule a shutdown for maintenance within the week, we're going to have a catastrophic failure. "Copy that, Mason," Dave said, sounding tired. You know Bennett isn't going to like hearing the word shutdown. We're 3 weeks behind on the expansion project as it is. "Bennett can like it or lump it," I muttered, adjusting my insulated gloves. They were Class 4 rubber, thick and clumsy, but they were the only thing standing between me and instant vaporization. Physics doesn't care about his production schedule. I spent the next hour documenting the wear and tear. I had been a high-voltage lineman for 32 years. I knew these grids better than I knew the back of my own hand. My hand had scars. These grids had secrets. This specific setup was complex. It wasn't just providing lights for an office, it was powering massive induction furnaces for a specialized metal refinery. If the power dipped for even a second, and the molten metal in the vats would begin to cool and solidify, ruining millions of dollars of inventory and destroying the equipment permanently. I was the only one on this site certified to touch the high side of the transformer. That certification wasn't just a piece of paper. It was thousands of hours of training, and a license that cost more to maintain than most people's cars. I lowered the bucket and landed on the gravel lot with a crunch. I began stripping off my harness, my movements methodical. Every clip, every carabiner was checked and stowed. You don't get old in this job by being sloppy. I saw a black luxury SUV tear into the muddy construction lot, swerving around a stack of conduit pipes. It parked aggressively next to the job trailer, taking up 2 spots. Bennett Myers stepped out. He was wearing a navy blue suit that cost more than my first house, and his Italian leather shoes were already getting ruined by the site mud. He didn't look like a general contractor. He looked like a hedge fund manager playing dress-up. He slammed the door and marched toward me, pointing a manicured finger. "Long!" he shouted. "Why is the bucket down? We have conduit to run on the north wall." I wiped a smudge of grease from my cheek. "Morning to you too, Bennett. The bucket is down because I was inspecting the main feed. We have a problem." Bennett stopped 3 feet from me, wrinkling his nose as if the smell of hard work offended him. He was a man who had inherited his father's construction firm and had spent the last 5 years expanding it rapidly, cutting corners wherever he could to underbid the competition. "I don't pay you to find problems, Mason," Bennett sneered. "I pay you to keep the juice flowing. Mr. Tanaka is flying in next month for the grand opening of the new wing. I need those furnaces online and testing by Friday." I picked up my thermal camera and held the screen up for him to see. "Look at this heat signature on the B-phase bushing. It's failing. The insulation is breaking down. If we run full load on Friday without replacing that connector, it will blow." Bennett waved his hand dismissively. "It's a piece of metal, Mason. It's fine. Just tighten it or put some tape on it. Whatever you Sparkies do." My jaw tightened. "Put tape on it? We're talking about transmission level voltage, Bennett. If that bushing fails, it won't just pop a breaker. It will explode. It could take out the whole substation. Yes, I need to order a replacement part, and we need a 12-hour shutdown to install it safely." 12 hours? Bennett's face turned a shade of red that matched the thermal image. "Are you insane?" A 12-hour shutdown cost me $50,000 in penalties. Absolutely not. It's either a scheduled shutdown now or an unscheduled explosion later, I said, keeping my voice calm. It was a tone I used when training apprentices, firm, factual, unyielding. I'm not signing off on the safety permit for the new wing until that maintenance is done. My license is on the line. Bennett laughed, a sharp barking sound. He looked around the site to make sure his crew was watching. He loved an audience. Your license? He mocked. You think you're special because you have a fancy card in your wallet? You're just a glorious electrician, Mason. You pull wire and flip switches. Don't act like you're a structural engineer. I'm a high-voltage lineman, I corrected him. And I'm telling you, under OSHA Regulation 1910.269, that equipment is unsafe. If you force the crew to work near it under load, I'm shutting down the site myself. The silence that followed was heavy. Big Dave, standing by the tool crib, looked down at his boots. He knew I was right, but he also knew Bennett held the paychecks. Bennett took a step closer, invading my personal space. I smelled expensive cologne, masking the scent of stale coffee. You don't shut down anything on my site, Long, Bennett hissed. I run this show. I own the contract. You work for me. Now, are you going to get back up in that bucket and sign off on the permit? Or do we have a problem? I looked him in the eye. I won't sign a death warrant, Bennett. Fix the bushing. Bennett stared at me for a long moment, his eyes darting to the younger guys watching from the scaffolding. He couldn't handle being told no in front of his employees. His ego was the only thing bigger than the transformer behind me. You know what your problem is, Mason? Bennett said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. You're old, you're slow, and you're too expensive. You think you're irreplaceable because you've been doing this since the Stone Age. Experience costs money, I said simply. Safety costs money. Sparkies are cheap, Bennett shouted, throwing his hands up. I can find a dozen guys who can climb a pole and turn a wrench for half of what I pay you. I'm tired of your lectures and your safety holds. I need people who want to work. Not people who want to find excuses. He turned toward the trailer and whistled. Kyle, get out here! The trailer door opened and Kyle, Bennett's 24-year-old nephew, jogged out. Kyle was a nice enough kid, but he was green. He had failed his journeyman exam twice and had 0 high-voltage certifications. He was wearing a brand new hard hat that didn't have a single scratch on it. Yeah, Uncle Bennett? Kyle asked, looking confused. Bennett pointed at me, then at the transformer. Mason is leaving. You're taking over the electrical lead. I felt a cold pit form in my stomach, not for me, but for the factory. Bennett, you can't be serious. Kyle isn't certified for anything over 600 volts. This is a 110 kilovolt system. If he touches the wrong thing, he dies. He's smart. He'll figure it out, Bennett scoffed. It's just wires. Mason, red to red, black to black. Kyle, grab the keys to the bucket truck from Mr. Long. Kyle looked terrified. He looked at the massive humming transformer, then at me. Uncle Bennett. Mason usually handles the high side. I don't really know the switching sequence. Shut up and take the keys, Bennett snapped. He turned back to me, a smug grin plastered on his face. You're fired, Mason. Get your gear and get off my site. I'm docking your final pay for the delay you caused this morning. I looked at the keys in my hand. I looked at the failing transformer humming its dangerous tune, and then I looked at Bennett. I didn't yell, I didn't beg, I didn't warn him again. I had given my professional opinion, and it had been rejected. Okay, I said. I dropped the keys into Kyle's trembling hand. Good luck. Way, kid, I said to Kyle. Don't touch the bushings, and wear your rubber. I walked over to the tool crib and started packing my personal specialized gear, my hot sticks, my meters, my climbing belt. Those were mine. Where do you think you're going with those? Bennett barked. Company property stays. Read my contract, Bennett, I said, snapping the latches on my heavy-duty case. I provide my own calibrated tools. You provide the headache. I'm taking the tools. I hefted the case onto my shoulder. It weighed 60 pounds, but it felt light compared to the weight of responsibility I was leaving behind. I walked past Bennett without looking at him. You'll regret walking away, Bennett yelled after me. You'll never work in this town again. I'll make sure of it. I reached my truck, threw my gear in the back, and started the engine. Just as I drove out of the muddy lot, I looked in the rearview mirror. I saw Bennett patting Kyle on the back, pointing up at the deadly equipment. I checked the time. 7:15 a.m. The heat on that bushing would continue to rise with the morning load. I gave it 3 weeks, maybe 4. I was wrong. It didn't even take that long. The drive home was quiet, too quiet. Usually my mornings were filled with the chatter of the site radio, the ringing of supplier calls, and the mental checklist of 100 different load calculations. Now, there was just the hum of my tires on the asphalt and the low murmur of the news radio. I pulled into a diner about 5 miles from the site, a place where the coffee tasted like battery acid, but the eggs were fresh. I needed a moment to decompress before I faced the reality of being unemployed at 58. I sat in a booth by the window, watching the rush hour traffic. My phone buzzed on the table. It was Big Dave. I debated ignoring it, but Dave was a good man. He was just caught in the middle. I slid the green icon. "Tell me he didn't make Kyle climb the structure," I said, skipping the hello. "He didn't," Dave whispered. The background noise was loud, grinders and heavy machinery. "But it's worse, Mason. Bennett ordered us to bypass the thermal overload relays on the main breaker. He said they were nuisance tripping and slowing down the testing phase." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "He what? Dave? Those relays are there to prevent the transformer from melting down. If you bypass them, you're flying blind. The system won't know it's overheating until it's on fire." "I know, Mason." I know." Dave sounded panicked. "But he's threatening to fire the whole crew. He brought in some guys from a temp agency to pull the rest of the cable. They don't even have steel-toed boots, let alone certifications. It's a circus down here." "Document everything, Dave," I advised, my voice low. "Take pictures. Send emails confirming his verbal orders. Cover your backside, because when that thing goes, insurance is going to look for a scapegoat, and Bennett will make sure it's not him." "I miss you already, boss," Dave said. "Kyle is walking around with a clipboard trying to look important, but he asked me if AC current has a positive and negative. We're doomed." I hung up and stared at my coffee. Bypassing safety relays wasn't just negligence, it was criminal. Bennett was gambling with $50 million of Mr. Tanaka's money and the lives of his workers just to save a few grand on a shutdown. I felt a strange mix of anger and grim satisfaction. I had built that power grid. I knew its tolerances. Bennett thought he had fired an employee, but he had actually just removed the only safety valve on a pressure cooker. I finished my coffee, left a generous tip for the waitress who looked as tired as I felt, and walked out. I wasn't going to look for another job today. Today, I was going to go home, clean my tools, and wait. 2 weeks went by. The silence from the industry was deafening. Usually, when a senior lineman becomes available, the phone rings off the hook. There is a shortage of guys with my level of certification. But my phone sat on my workbench, silent as a stone. I spent the days in my garage, restoring a 1967 pickup truck I'd owned for 20 years. It was therapeutic work, simple mechanics, tangible results. If a bolt was stripped, you replaced it. You didn't tape it up and hope for the best. On the 3rd Tuesday, I decided to test the waters. I called an old contact at the Municipal Utility Board, a guy named Frank I'd known since we were apprentices climbing wooden poles in the rain. "Mason," Frank said, his tone clipped. "I was wondering if you'd call." "I'm looking for some contract work, Frank. Got anything on the transmission upgrade downtown?" There was a long pause. "I can't hire you, Mason. Word is out. Bennett Myers sent a memo to the Regional Contractors Association. He's claiming you walked off the job mid-critical path and sabotaged the equipment before you left. He's calling it gross negligence." My blood ran cold. "Sabotage? I asked for a safety inspection, Frank. He fired me for it." "I believe you," Frank sighed. "But Bennett has lawyers, and he's loud. Until this blows over, you're radioactive. Nobody wants to touch a guy who's being sued for project delays. Sorry, Mason." The line went dead. I stood there in my garage, the smell of oil and sawdust in the air, feeling the walls close in. Bennett wasn't satisfied with firing me. He wanted to destroy me. He wanted to make sure I couldn't earn a living, so I wouldn't have the resources to fight him for wrongful termination. It was a bully tactic. Standard operating procedure for guys like him. He thought I was just a blue-collar worker who would fold under the pressure, apologize, and beg for scraps. He forgot one thing. Yes, I had saved a life once, a long time ago, and that life had grown up to be a shark. I wiped the grease from my hands with a rag. I didn't need a job anymore. I needed a lawyer. Cooper Sanders' office was on the 42nd floor of a glass tower downtown, overlooking the city like a fortress. The waiting room smelled of money, leather, mahogany, and silence. I sat in my clean flannel shirt and work boots, looking out of place amidst the suits and briefcases. The receptionist, a young woman with severe glasses, looked at me skeptically over her monitor. "Mr. Sanders is in a high-priority deposition," she said for the third time. "He really doesn't have time for walk-ins." "Just tell him Mason is here," I said patiently. "Tell him it's about the trench in 2004. She rolled her eyes but picked up the phone. She whispered something. I paused, and then her face went pale. She hung up slowly. "Go right in, sir. The double doors at the end." I walked down the hallway. The double doors flew open before I even reached them. Cooper Sanders stood there, arms wide open. He was wearing a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost $5,000, but beneath the expensive fabric, I could still see the build of the scrawny kid who used to haul concrete bags for me. "Mason!" Cooper boomed, grabbing my hand in a crushing grip. "I haven't seen you in 5 years. You look exactly the same, still ugly. And you still look like a weasel in a suit, Cooper," I smiled. He laughed and ushered me into his office, which was larger than my entire house. He poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. "To the trench," he said, raising a glass. "To the trench," I replied. 20 years ago, a shoring wall had collapsed on a muddy site. Cooper, then a 19-year-old laborer, had been buried up to his neck. The fire department said it was too unstable to dig him out immediately. I didn't wait. I jumped in with a shovel and dug him out by hand while the mud groaned around us. I pulled him free 10 seconds before the secondary collapse filled the hole completely. He owed me his life. He had gone to law school at night, fueled by a hatred for unsafe work conditions, and had become the most feared labor attorney in the state. We sat down. Cooper's demeanor shifted instantly from old friend to predator. He leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "You didn't come here for the view, Mason. You look like a man who's been cornered. Who is it?" "Bennett Myers," I said. Cooper let out a low whistle. "The golden boy. I've been wanting to take a bite out of him for years. What did he do?" I told him everything. The failing transformer, the refusal to shut down, the firing, the nephew, and the blacklisting. Cooper listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he didn't look angry. He looked delighted. "He accused you of sabotage in writing?" Cooper asked. "Memo to the Contractors Association," I confirmed. Cooper smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf looking at a limping deer. "Mason, my friend," Cooper said, tapping his pen on the desk. "Bennett Myers just made the biggest mistake of his life. He didn't just fire you, he defamed you while committing gross negligence on a $50 million contract. We aren't just going to get your job back. We're going to take his company apart, brick by brick." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. "But first," Cooper said, turning back to me, "we wait. We need him to hang himself completely. You said the transformer is failing?" "It's running 70 degrees over ambient," I said. "It won't last another week." "Good," Cooper said coldly. "Let it burn." Cooper's strategy was simple, aggressive silence. We filed nothing. We sent no letters. We let Bennett believe he had successfully crushed me. In the construction world, silence is usually interpreted as defeat. Bennett, arrogant as he was, would see my lack of response as submission. Meanwhile, I kept tabs on the site through Big Dave. We met at a dive bar 2 towns over, huddled in a back booth like conspirators. "It's a nightmare, Mason," Dave said, nursing a beer. He looked exhausted. Dark circles rimmed his eyes, and his hands had a slight tremor. "Kyle is running the crew into the ground. He has them pulling wire 18 hours a day to make up the schedule. No overtime pay, just promises of bonuses when the job is done." "What about the transformer?" I asked, cutting to the chase. "It's screaming," Dave said. "You can hear it from the parking lot now, a loud, angry buzzing. The temp agency guys are terrified of it. Kyle told them it's normal operation noise for a high-voltage unit." I shook my head. "It's arcing internally. The insulation oil is breaking down. It's creating gas bubbles. It's a bomb, Dave." "I know," Dave whispered. I tried to tell Bennett. He told me if I mentioned the transformer one more time, I could join you on the unemployment line. Dave pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and slid it across the sticky table. "I shouldn't have this," he said, "but you told me to document everything." I unfolded it. It was a photocopy of a work order signed by Bennett. It authorized the rental of a massive diesel generator, a backup unit capable of powering the whole plant. But the delivery date was set for after the grand opening. He knows, I realized. He knows the grid is unstable. He's trying to limp it across the finish line for the client inspection, get his final payment released, and then swap to generator power if it fails later. He's going to claim it was a post-handover equipment failure. "There's more," Dave said. "He fired the third-party inspectors, said we're doing internal verification now. Kyle is signing off on the safety sheets." My stomach turned. Kyle signing off on high-voltage safety checks was like a toddler signing off on a nuclear launch. "Get your guys out of the blast zone, Dave," I warned him. "When they power up the new furnace for the full load test, be somewhere else. Be in the bathroom, be in the truck. Just don't be near that substation." 3 days later, the first flicker happened. It wasn't a total blackout. It was a warning shot. I was sitting in Cooper's office reviewing the defamation lawsuit we were preparing when my phone lit up with a text from Dave. "Lights just dipped. Huge boom from the sub yard. Kyle is running around screaming." I showed the text to Cooper. He didn't look up from his legal pad. "Is the power out?" "Not yet," I said, interpreting the next text. "Breaker held. But they just took a massive voltage spike. Probably fried every computer not on a UPS." Cooper nodded. "It's starting. Bennett is going to panic. He'll try to patch it." Back at the site, chaos was unfolding. According to Dave, the surge had tripped the main drives for the ventilation system. The factory floor was filling with smoke from the welding stations. Mr. Tanaka's representatives were on site for a preliminary walkthrough, and the lights in the conference room had flickered and dimmed right in the middle of Bennett's presentation. Bennett, true to form, had lied. He told the reps it was a utility-side fluctuation, blaming the city's power grid instead of his own failing equipment. He sent Kyle out to reset the breakers, a dangerous and stupid move on a live fault. Miraculously, the breaker held when Kyle slammed it back in. The lights came back on, the ventilation roared to life. Bennett wiped the sweat from his forehead and smiled at the clients. "See? Just a glitch in the city feed. Our system is robust." He was lying to the people writing his checks. He was lying to the people whose lives were at risk. That evening, I received a voicemail. It was from a blocked number. "Mason, look, it's Bennett." His voice was tight, stressed. "I know we left things poorly. I need you to come in for a consult. Just a one-day thing. We have a minor calibration issue. I'll pay your day rate. Call me." I played the message for Cooper. "He sounds desperate," I said. "He is," Cooper agreed. "Don't call him back." "But the safety—" "Mason," Cooper said sharply, "if you go back now, you validate his negligence. You become liable again. If you touch that equipment and it blows up tomorrow, he will blame you. He will say he brought you in to fix it and you failed. Stay away. Let the rot show." I knew Cooper was right, legally, but morally, it was hard to sit on my hands while my former crew walked on a minefield. "I won't call him," I agreed. "But if Dave calls and says it's critical, I'm telling him to evacuate." The end came on a Friday afternoon, exactly as I had predicted. The Tanaka factory was conducting its first full-load test of the new induction furnaces. This was the moment of truth, drawing maximum amperage to melt 10 tons of steel alloy. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The sun was high. I was in my garden, pruning roses, trying to keep my mind off the inevitable. My phone didn't ring. It didn't buzz. It simply lit up with a news alert from the local station app. "Breaking explosion at Tanaka Manufacturing Plant. Smoke seen for miles." My heart stopped. I dropped the shears and ran inside, turning on the TV. The news helicopter footage showed the substation. It was a crater. The transformer I had warned them about was a blackened, twisted wreck, still spewing thick black smoke. The containment wall was breached, and oil fire was spreading across the gravel lot. The factory itself was dark, dead dark. No lights, no ventilation, no hum of industry. Just a silent, hulking monolith in the smoke. I grabbed my phone and dialed Dave. It went straight to voicemail. I dialed again. Voicemail, panic, cold and sharp, seized my chest. If Dave had been near that bushing, My phone rang in my hand. It was Dave. "I'm okay," he coughed. "Yeah, I'm okay, Mason. We're all okay." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "Where were you?" "I listened to you," Dave said, his voice shaking. "When they started the ramp-up sequence, I took the whole crew to the far side of the warehouse for a safety briefing. Bennett was screaming at me on the radio to get back to work. Then, boom. It felt like an earthquake, Mason. The door to the electrical room blew off its hinges. "Is anyone hurt?" "Kyle," Dave said grimly. "He was in the control room, shattered glass. He's cut up pretty bad, but he's alive. The paramedics are loading him now." "And the factory?" "Dead," Dave said. "Total loss of power. The molten metal in the furnaces? It's cooling, Mason. They can't dump it because the tilt mechanisms are electric. It's going to solidify inside the vessels. The whole production line is bricked." I closed my eyes. Millions of dollars in equipment, ruined in hours. A $50 million contract up in smoke. All because Bennett didn't want to spend 50 grand on a shutdown. "Bennett is pacing around the parking lot throwing up," Dave added. "He looks like a ghost." "Tell the crew to go home, Dave," I said softly. "It's over." "Yeah," Dave said. "It's over." But I knew it wasn't. For Bennett Myers, the nightmare was just beginning. And for me, it was time to answer the phone. The smoke had barely cleared before the finger-pointing began. But for the factory, the real disaster was silent and hardening. Inside the massive induction vessels, tons of molten alloy were slowly turning into solid rock. Once that metal hardened, the furnaces were destroyed. They would have to be jackhammered out, a process that would take months. My phone started ringing at 4:00 p.m. Unknown numbers, agency reps. Then, finally, Bennett again. I let it ring. Cooper called me 10 minutes later. "Don't answer anything," he commanded. "Not yet. Let the desperation marinate. Right now, Bennett is trying to spin a narrative. He's telling the owners it was a freak accident or a manufacturer defect. He needs a scapegoat or he needs a miracle. We are neither." "The factory is dead, Cooper," I said. "Every hour that metal sits, the damage multiplies." "I know," Cooper said, his voice void of sympathy. "And every hour, your value goes up. Mr. Tanaka isn't stupid. He's going to ask for the maintenance logs. He's going to ask for the inspection reports. And when he finds out they don't exist, he's going to look for the man who tried to warn them." I spent the night watching the local news. They interviewed Bennett briefly. He looked disheveled, his tie loose, soot on his expensive shirt. "We are doing everything we can," Bennett stammered into the microphone. "It was an unforeseeable, catastrophic failure. We have the best teams working on it." Lies. He had no team. His team was a group of terrified temp workers and a nephew in the hospital. At 2:00 a.m., my doorbell rang. I flipped on the porch light. It was Bennett. He looked wrecked. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands shaking. He held a bottle of scotch in one hand and a crumpled piece of paper in the other. "Mason," he slurred through the door. "Open up. We need to talk." I didn't open the door. I spoke through the glass. "Go home, Bennett. Bye, you're drunk." "I can fix this," he yelled, slamming his hand against the doorframe. "I just need you to sign the retroactive inspection sheets. Just sign them, say you checked it last week and it was fine. I'll pay you. I'll give you 10 grand cash right now." I stepped back, disgusted. He wanted me to falsify records to cover his negligence. He wanted me to go to prison for him. "Get off my property," I said, "or I'm calling the cops." He stared at me, hatred and fear warring in his eyes. Then he spat on my porch and stumbled back to his SUV. I called Cooper immediately. "He tried to bribe you?" Cooper asked, wide awake. "Witnessed by my Ring doorbell camera," I said. "Beautiful," Cooper whispered. "Absolutely beautiful." The next morning, the tone shifted. Bennett realized threats and drunken bribes wouldn't work. But so he tried to buy me back officially. An email arrived at 8 a.m. Subject reinstatement offer. Urgent. It was a contract. He was offering to rehire me at double my previous hourly rate, with a signing bonus of $5,000. The condition? I had to lead the emergency recovery team starting immediately. And, buried in the fine print, I had to sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding all prior site conditions. He wanted me to fix the mess and legally gag me from talking about why it happened. I forwarded it to Cooper. "Insulting," Cooper replied via text. He thinks he can buy a $50 million liability shield for a few grand. Reject it. I wrote a one-line reply. My safety concerns stand. I will not return under the current management or conditions. An hour later, a second email. Triple the rate. Nay, $10,000 bonus. I rejected it again. By noon, the factory owners had arrived. Mr. Tanaka's private jet had landed. The pressure on Bennett was now nuclear. Cooper called me. Pack a suit, Mason. We're going to get a call soon, but it won't be from Bennett. Who? Mr. Tanaka, Cooper said. He's been in the country for 4 hours. By now, his own investigators have looked at the crater. They know Bennett is lying. They're looking for the guy who ran the site for 5 years without a single outage. That's you. Cooper was right about the call, but wrong about the source. It was Bennett's lawyer, a man named Sterling, ironically, who called Cooper directly. We are prepared to offer your client a settlement, Sterling said on his speakerphone in Cooper's office. 6 months severance, full reinstatement, and a $20,000 consulting fee to oversee the repairs. In exchange, Mr. Long drops any potential wrongful termination claims and issues a joint statement supporting Mr. Myers' account of the accident. Cooper laughed. He actually laughed out loud. Mr. Sterling, Cooper said, leaning back in his leather chair, my client isn't interested in severance, and he certainly isn't interested in perjury. The factory is dark. The furnaces are bricked. Your client, Mr. Myers, is liable for roughly $60 million in damages. And you want Mason to issue a joint statement? It's a generous offer, Sterling said, his voice tight. Mason is just a lineman. He's not going to get a better deal. Mason isn't just a lineman, Cooper corrected him sharply. He is the only high-voltage certified expert in the region who knows that grid, and right now, he is the only person who can turn the lights back on safely. What do you want? Sterling asked. We don't want anything from Bennett, Cooper said. We are done negotiating with him. Mason will not work for Bennett Myers ever again. If the factory wants power, they can talk to us. But Bennett, he's finished. Cooper hung up the phone. That was risky, I said. If they bring in a crew from out of state, they can't, Cooper said. I checked. The nearest HV crew with industrial refinery experience is in Texas. They're 3 days out. Tanaka loses $1 million every 6 hours the plant is down. They don't have 3 days. He turned to me, his eyes gleaming. We just rejected the middleman, Mason. Oh, now the king has to come to us. By the 48-hour mark, the situation at the Tanaka plant had shifted from a crisis to a financial hemorrhage. The local news was running non-stop coverage. Drone shots showed the silent factory, the smoking crater of the substation, and the idle trucks lining the perimeter. Inside, the damage was becoming permanent. The molten alloy in the furnaces had solidified into massive 10-ton plugs of metal. To fix this, they wouldn't just need to restore power. They would have to cut the furnaces apart with thermal lances, essentially destroying the core of the factory to save the shell. Mr. Tanaka was not a man who tolerated failure. Rumor had it, he had once fired an entire executive board for missing a quarterly target by 1%. I sat in Cooper's conference room, watching the clock. Now, every minute that ticks by, Cooper said, tapping his pen, Bennett's insurance policy is screaming. They've probably already sent a denial letter based on gross negligence. If the insurance denies the claim, I said, realizing the magnitude, Bennett is personally on the hook. Exactly, Cooper nodded. He'll be bankrupt by Friday. At 2:00 p.m., Cooper's assistant buzzed in. Mr. Sanders, a Mr. Tanaka is on line 1, not a lawyer, Mr. Tanaka himself. Cooper looked at me. Showtime. Let me do the talking. He pressed the speaker button. This is Cooper Sanders. Mr. Sanders, a calm, heavily accented voice filled the room. I am holding a report from my forensic engineering team. They tell me that a safety bypass was installed on the main breaker relays. They also tell me that the primary containment bushing was 70 degrees over thermal limits for weeks. That matches my client's assessment, Cooper said smoothly. Your client, Tanaka continued, is Mason Long. My engineers tell me he is the one who installed the original grid 5 years ago. They say it was flawless. He takes pride in his work, Cooper said. Why is he not on site? Tanaka asked. It wasn't a question, it was an accusation. Because he was fired for attempting to fix the very issue that destroyed your factory, Cooper said. He was replaced by an unlicensed apprentice to save money. There was a long silence on the other end. I see. I am currently in a meeting with Mr. Myers. He claims Mr. Long sabotaged the equipment. I clenched my fists, but Cooper put a calming hand on my arm. Mr. Tanaka, Cooper said. Mr. Long has the rejection of the safety permit he submitted. He has the time-stamped thermal images from the morning he was fired. And we have a witness willing to testify that Mr. Myers ordered the safety bypass. I do not care about lawsuits right now, Tanaka said, his voice turning icy. I care about my factory. I need power. The Texas crew is too far away. Can Mr. Long restore the grid? Cooper looked at me. I nodded. I can bypass the damaged transformer and bring up the auxiliary feed, but I need total control. No Bennett, no interference. Mr. Sanders, Tanaka said, please bring Mr. Long to the factory immediately. We will have an emergency meeting. We drove to the site in Cooper's black sedan. The security guards at the gate, who usually wave me through, though looked confused but opened the barrier when they saw the legal sticker on the windshield. The devastation was worse up close. The smell of burnt oil and ozone hung heavy in the air. The main transformer was a blackened skeleton. We walked into the main conference room. It was crowded. Mr. Tanaka sat at the head of the table, flanked by two serious-looking Japanese engineers. Bennett Myers sat on the right, looking like a man who had not slept in 3 days. His suit was rumpled, his face pale and sweaty. His lawyer, Sterling, sat next to him, looking grim. When I walked in, Bennett stood up. This is ridiculous. You're bringing in the saboteur? Sit down, Mr. Myers, Tanaka said softly. The command had the weight of a falling anvil. Bennett sat. I took a seat opposite him. Cooper sat beside me, then opening his briefcase with a deliberate click. Mr. Long, Tanaka said, looking at me with dark, intelligent eyes. My engineers say the B-phase bushing failed. Do you agree? Yes, sir, I said. I identified the thermal anomaly 3 weeks ago. I recommended a 12-hour shutdown to replace it. I was denied. Liar! Bennett shouted. He never submitted a formal request. He just complained and walked off. Cooper slid a piece of paper across the table to Tanaka. Here is a copy of the safety permit Mason filled out on the morning of his termination. It is marked refused and signed by your site foreman under protest. Tanaka picked up the paper. He read it, then looked at Bennett. Mr. Myers, did you see this? Bennett stammered. It was a busy morning. I might have overlooked it. But that doesn't excuse him leaving. He didn't leave, Cooper interjected. You fired him. And then you replaced him with your nephew, Kyle, who is currently in the hospital. Shall we discuss Kyle's certifications? Or lack thereof? Bennett went silent. Here is the reality, Cooper said, addressing Tanaka. Mason can have the auxiliary power running in 6 hours. He knows where the redundant conduits are buried, something Bennett's team evidently forgot since they haven't touched them. But Mason doesn't work for Bennett anymore. I will rehire him, Bennett offered quickly. I'll pay him triple. No, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. I won't work for you, Bennett. Not for triple. Not for $1 million. You don't respect the work, and you don't respect the danger. I turned to Tanaka. I will work for you, sir, directly, if you terminate Bennett's contract and hire my company as the primary vendor. Bennett laughed nervously. His company? He's one guy with a truck. Mr. Tanaka, we have a binding contract. You can't just fire the general contractor because of one equipment failure. One failure? Cooper smiled. Mr. Tanaka, before you make a decision, you should see this. Cooper pulled a second document from his briefcase. This was the one we had been saving. The life twist evidence. This, Cooper said, is a copy of the billing invoice Bennett Myers submitted to your accounting department last month. It lists premium high-voltage maintenance, certified specialist at a rate of $250 per hour for 40 hours a week. Cooper slid another paper. This is the payroll record for the temp agency workers he actually had on site. Unlicensed laborers paid $18 an hour. The room went deadly silent. He wasn't just cutting corners on safety, Cooper said. He was billing you for expert work while paying for unskilled labor. He was pocketing the difference. That is not negligence, Mr. Tanaka. That is fraud. Bennett's face turned gray. He looked at his lawyer, but Sterling was staring at the table, distancing himself from his own client. Mr. Tanaka picked up the invoices. He compared the numbers. His expression didn't change, but the air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Mr. Myers," Tanaka said, "is this accurate?" It's standard industry markup," Bennett squeaked. "Overhead, administration. Charging for a certified specialist when none is present is not markup," Tanaka said. "It is theft." Tanaka turned to his head of security, who was standing by the door. "Please escort Mr. Myers off the property. He is trespassing." "You can't do this!" Bennett screamed, standing up. "I have a contract. I'll sue you. I'll sue all of you." "Please do," Tanaka said calmly. "My lawyers will enjoy the discovery phase regarding your billing practices." 2 guards stepped forward. Bennett looked at me, his eyes wide with shock. He couldn't believe it. The cheap Sparky had just taken his throne. As they dragged him out, he was still yelling about his contract. Tanaka waited until the door closed. Then he looked at me. "Mr. Long," he said, "how soon can you have the lights on?" 6 hours, I said. "Namur, if Big Dave is still around to help me pull the cable." "Hire him," Tanaka said. "Hire whoever you need. You are the general contractor now." Bennett was gone, but the ghost of his negligence remained. The conference room was quiet, save for the hum of the ventilation system that was running on emergency backup, barely enough to move the air. Mr. Tanaka looked at me, his face unreadable. "You said 6 hours, Mr. Long. The clock started 5 minutes ago." I stood up. "I need access to the site keys, the blueprints for the auxiliary conduit runs, and the authority to bring my own crew on site immediately without background check delays." "Granted," Tanaka said. He handed me a master key card. "Do not fail me." I walked out of the executive wing and dialed Big Dave. "Dave," I said when he picked up, "get the boys, all of them. Even the ones Bennett fired last month. Meet me at the gate in 20 minutes. "What's going on, Mason?" Dave asked, sounding wary. "We don't work for Bennett." "No," I said, feeling a surge of adrenaline I hadn't felt in years. "You work for me now, and we have a factory to save." When I reached the substation, the reality of the task hit me. It was a disaster zone. The main transformer was slag. To bypass it, we had to manually route 3 massive 500 MCM cables from the utility feed directly to the secondary switchgear, bypassing the blown unit entirely. It was heavy, dangerous, back-breaking work. Dave and the crew arrived in a convoy of pickup trucks. When they saw me standing by the open gate, holding the master keys, a cheer went up that must have scared the birds out of the trees. "All right, listen up," I yelled. Yes, my voice cutting through the chatter. "We have 5 hours and 40 minutes to pull 3,000 feet of high-voltage cable, terminate the ends, and phase-match the connections. If we mess up, we blow up the only backup we have. Safety is priority 1. Speed is priority 2. Bennett isn't here to scream at you anymore. Do it right." We worked like a machine. For the first time in months, there was no yelling, no confusion, and no fear. Just the rhythmic sound of cable being pulled through conduit, the click of torque wrenches, and the crisp communication of professionals. As we worked, we found more of Bennett's cost-saving measures. The conduit was half the required thickness. The ground wires were undersized. It was a miracle the place hadn't burned down sooner. Yet I documented every single violation with my phone. More ammo for Cooper. By hour 5, my hands were blistered and my back was screaming, but the cables were laid. We were ready to terminate. While we were wrestling with copper and insulation, Cooper was dismantling Bennett's life. He showed up at the site just as we were finishing the final connections. He was still in his suit, but he had loosened his tie. He looked like a man who had just eaten a very satisfying meal. "Update?" I asked, wiping grease from my forehead. "Bennett is currently in a holding cell," Cooper said casually, leaning against a concrete pylon. "Turns out, when you defraud a multinational corporation like Tanaka Heavy Industries, they don't just sue you, they call the district attorney." "Arrested?" I asked, shocked. "Fraud, criminal negligence. Oh, and, thanks to your invoices, theft of services." Cooper listed them off on his fingers. His insurance carrier officially denied the claim an hour ago. They cited willful misconduct. That means Bennett is personally liable for the $60 million in damages. I looked at the charred remains of the transformer. "He's ruined." "He's done," Cooper corrected. "His assets are frozen. His reputation is incinerated." And Sterling, his lawyer, he resigned as counsel about 20 minutes ago. said he had a conflict of interest regarding the fraudulent billing. Cooper watched the crew tightening the final bolts on the switchgear. "You know the best part?" Cooper asked. "What?" "Tanaka offered you the regional maintenance contract. 5 years, guaranteed exclusive. You're not just a lineman anymore, Mason. Yeah, you're the CEO of the company that replaced Bennett Myers." I looked at Dave, who was giving me a thumbs up from the bucket truck. I looked at the massive factory, silent and dark, waiting for a heartbeat. "I don't want to be a CEO," I muttered. "I just want the lights to work." "Well," Cooper patted my shoulder, "you can be a rich CEO who wants the lights to work. Now, go turn them on." The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the gravel lot. Mr. Tanaka and his executive team stood on the observation deck, watching. I stood in front of the main breaker for the auxiliary feed. I had my arc flash suit on. The full 40 cal moon suit. Even with all the checks, closing a breaker on a system. This large is always a moment of violence. You are unleashing a river of energy. "Radio check," I said into my headset. "It's clear on the floor," Dave replied. "All personnel accounted for, ready for power." I took a deep breath. I gripped the handle. Closing in 3, 2, 1. I slammed the lever up. Thwack. The mechanical latch slammed home with the sound of a gunshot, followed immediately by the deep, resonant hum of current flooding the bus bars. I watched the meters. Voltage stabilized. Amperage climbed steady. No explosions, no alarms. Then, a roar. Not from the equipment, but from the factory. The massive ventilation fans spun up. The high bay lights flickered and blazed to life, turning the dark windows into squares of gold. The factory was alive. I pulled off my hood and looked up at the observation deck. Mr. Tanaka didn't cheer. He simply nodded at me, a slow, respectful bow of the head. Oh, it was the best paycheck I'd ever earned. I wasn't climbing poles anymore. My knees couldn't take it. I was running Long and Associates, the premier high-voltage consultancy in the state. Big Dave was my operations manager. Kyle, believe it or not, was my newest apprentice. After he got out of the hospital, he came to me and apologized. He wanted to learn the right way. I gave him a shovel and told him to start digging. He hasn't complained once. I took a sip of iced tea and looked at the sunset. I spent 30 years thinking that if I just kept my head down and did my job, the world would treat me fair. I was wrong. The world is full of Bennetts, people who see safety as a cost and expertise as an expense. My mistake wasn't that I stood up to him. My mistake was that I waited so long to realize my own value. I let him treat me like a replaceable part because I was afraid of the unknown. I trusted that the system would protect me, but the system is only as good as the people running it. Here is what I learned, and what I want you to take away from this first. Documentation is your shield. If I hadn't saved those thermal images, if I hadn't made Dave keep those texts, I would have been the one in that courtroom, not Bennett. If it's not written down, it didn't happen. Second, safety is not a negotiation. If a boss asks you to do something that feels wrong, unsafe, or illegal, the answer is no. Not maybe, not just this once. The answer is no. Your life is worth more than their deadline. And finally, know your worth. Bennett called me a cheap Sparky. He thought he could replace 30 years of experience with a warm body and a lower hourly rate. He found out the hard way that you pay for quality once, or you pay for failure forever. Don't let anyone discount your skills. Stand your ground, keep your receipts, and never ever let them touch the high voltage unless they know what they're doing. If this story of justice touched you, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. We have more stories coming from the archives every week. Stay safe out there.